Hey guys, I'm here today because I just spent all night Saturday night, like until 1 in the morning, obsessing over Shibori dyeing. I had made the mixture around 8:30 and I couldn't stop banding fabric, dyeing it, re-dyeing it, and just kind of playing with all of the things that you can do with Shibori dye. It got to the point where I was even dyeing wooden bracelets and yarn in my hands, which has yet to come out. So I thought I would share with you some of the techniques that I did that I found successful so that you can try your hand at Shibori dye. You can use inexpensive fabric. I bought a bolt of muslin because I really wanted to explore and try different things. But even just this really thin piece of fabric that we happen to have around the house, that was fun for me to play with. And now I have this beautiful scarf to wear. So I'm really excited and I'm thrilled to share with you all of the different techniques so that you can see just how easy this is. Like I said, muslin is something you're going to need. The kit that I used was by Jacquard. It was an indigo dyeing kit. It could dye up to 15 shirts, so that was a lot of fabric and yarn and things for me to dye, and I purchased it off of Amazon. So let me share with you some of these really simple and successful banding techniques so you can experiment with Shibori dye yourself. Okay, so before you start dyeing anything, you'll want to prepare your dye. And preparing your dye, follow those directions on the box to a T. They're not hard, but what I found interesting was the part where you have to remove where I'm assuming, where some of the oxygen mixed with the dye, which caused a bubble. It's referred to as a flower in the instructions. Make sure you really remove all of that part of the flower. Otherwise, you're going to end up with little speckles of indigo on what you're creating. So I thought I'd show you the different kind of patterns that I was able to achieve with the different tying methods that I used. So what I did was I mixed up my dye. It said for best results, let the dye rest for an hour. So I mixed it up and then I went inside and I just started banding all of my pieces of muslin. So to achieve this look, a lot of the folding techniques that you'll use are an accordion fold, and you can probably see some of those horizontal lines that I have in mind. And you can usually tell just by looking at something what the technique was. You can probably figure out that right through here is where I had the rubber bands. So I used muslin, like I said, but you don't have to use muslin. You could use anything that's cotton, anything that's basically not a synthetic that will hold a dye. So to do an accordion fold, you're just folding it one direction, and then you could flip the whole thing back and fold it the opposite direction and just keep doing that. And I cut my squares because I wanted these to be napkins. I cut them 18 inches. That gave me enough seam allowance because, of course, I'll have to go back and add a little bit of an edge. That gave me enough seam allowance to make about 16-inch squares for napkins. So you can see it's not perfect along the edges, and that's okay. Once you've got that, then you can start banding. Ideally, you'd want to use rubber bands, but I cut most of my rubber bands to remove them because I was too lazy to undo them. So now I'm left with hair ties, which would work just as well. I got them at the dollar store. So when you do this, you want to make sure it's fairly tight. The tighter it is, the more it will resist or keep out that dye. So I did it until basically I couldn't do it anymore. But if you wanted more of the dye to show through, then you would do it a little bit more loosely. And then just kind of depending on the pattern of stripes you wanted, that's where you would put the rubber band. So if I had one here, I usually kind of did mine symmetrical, same on both sides kind of deal, just because that was the look that I was going to go for. So that's how you could achieve this look. So you can see I put a band there, another one there, another one there, and then 3 right there in the middle. Before this goes in the dye bath, these pieces of fabric have to be completely saturated. If it's not wet all the way through, then it won't take any dye. So you might have these giant areas where it's bright white, like I do, as opposed to having these really pretty kind of gradations of color. So you'll want to make sure it's saturated. Let it sit in a nice bucket of water before you add it to the dye bath, and that's in the directions. All right, so that's how you do that kind of folding and banding. This one was a lot of fun, and what I did for this one was I took my sewing pin, one of those disappearing ink kind of markers, and I folded my fabric so I could find the center point, and then I folded it again, and then I kept folding it until I could find the centers of each space, and I just put a little X in those, and then I went back and did the space in between. I did another X there, and then in order to bind that, I used some wooden beads. So what I did for where it was just 2, I used smaller beads, and where it was 3, I used the bigger ones. So you wouldn't even have to have wooden beads on hand. If you had things like pennies, that would work. You don't even have to put anything inside of it. I'll show you what that would look like in just a moment. But once I've had it marked with my disappearing ink pen, I knew exactly where to put my bead, and all I did was I put it inside. And because I didn't want, looks like I used a smaller bead actually, because I didn't want to have to wrap a rubber band around and around it, at the dollar store I picked up some of those really tiny rubber bands that are used for like baby fine kind of hair. So those came in handy because they were cheap, and because it meant that I only had to wrap it around that bead 2 or 3 times. Again, the more that you wrap it, the more it's going to resist that dye. And so this, once you can see, once it's got a bead in it, it's kind of hard to tell where the other ones will go, and that's where the little marking of your disappearing ink comes in really handy. Even if you want to make 1X bigger so you know a bigger bead goes there. And I don't think it matters if you always have them going in the back or not, but I like to put them under, twist it a little bit, and that will help resist even more, and then bind it a couple of times. Now when these come out of the dye bath, it's a little bit difficult to get your scissors underneath there, so all I did when they came out was I just kind of stretched the fabric, maybe, to get it to pop out, just like that. That way I didn't have to worry about cutting that little tiny rubber band and chance accidentally cutting the fabric. So that's how the look of these circles were kind of accomplished. Now you can kind of see it's different on the other side, which is cool. But you can see there's a difference between these and these. And let me explain to you what I did for these. For these, I also did the marking with the pen because you can see I was creating a pattern. However, I didn't use any beads. This time, I kind of did it the tie-dye method. I just kind of pushed the fabric up to create like a little bit of a point. And I put 1 rubber band there, twisted it, put another one there, twisted it, put another one there. So with those 3 rubber bands, you can kind of actually see the line. That's how I was able to achieve these bigger circles. For the smaller ones you see, I would only put 1 rubber band. So I would pick it up, twist, and 1 rubber band. And again, you've got to mark that fabric because, as you can imagine, trying to figure out where the next one goes would be difficult when it's all scrunched up with these little teeny tiny peaks with the rubber bands around them. So, this guy. This one is a lot of fun, and in fact, if you order the kit, the supplies for doing this comes in the kit to kind of make this squared off section. So to do this, going to take your fabric, and again, accordion fold. There's a lot of accordion folds. There's a lot of cool folding just in general with Shibori, where you can get lots of different effects. So there's that. And once you've got it accordion folded, then you're going to start folding a triangle. So I'm going to fold that up. And then you're doing like an accordion fold of a triangle. You don't want to keep folding it in. That would be too much fabric tucked inside, which would mean it would all stay kind of white. So I'm just kind of doing an accordion fold. Until I get to the end, and I never worried that it wasn't even or didn't match up, but now I've got this like accordion fold. Looks like a little triangle sandwich. And then your kit comes with these 2 blocks, and there's actually directions on how to do this. Just put 1 block there, sandwich it between, and then bind it. And where you put your block is where you're going to see these sections that stay white. Now, if you do it loosely like I did, that scarf that I showed you at the start of this video, that was done this way, very loosely. If you do it really tightly, like put that rubber band around there a second time, it's going to resist a lot more, which is how this look was accomplished. So that one's pretty easy. All of these are so easy and fun. You can experiment in so many different ways. This one is just another take on kind of traditional tie-dye. You can see where the rubber bands are because that's where all those little lines are, those like cool ghost looking lines. So all I did, instead of starting in the middle like a traditional tie-dye, I just started at one end and I started twisting it. And for these little pieces of fabric where it was very small, I didn't want to have to wrap a regular rubber band around it 3,295 times, so I just used one of those baby hair ties and wrapped that just a couple of times around. And I just kept twisting and banding until I was all the way down to the bottom of the fabric. And wherever the fabric was more exposed, that's where it took more dye. And again, just make sure you really let it sit in that dye bath so that it can capture some of those really beautiful gradations of color. All right, on to the next one. Okay, so this was the first one I did. And I have to tell you, it made me sad. It didn't turn out at all how I was hoping it would. I didn't know what to expect. That's the cool thing, is you don't know what to expect. But if you get one that is a bit of a bummer and you don't dig it, then don't trash it. Try re-dyeing it. So if you can imagine, this was all dark blue and all bright white. And the reason was because I didn't let it soak in the water long enough. So what I did the second time was I just totally undid it like you see, and I dipped the whole thing in and out of the dye bath very quickly, which gave it this really beautiful light blue color. So to do this, these are probably the easiest kind that you can do. All you're going to do for that kind of tie-dye where it just looks like there's no rhyme or reason, that's because there is no rhyme or reason. You're basically just kind of scrunching it all together. These are fun because it's kind of like a surprise. Now, the tighter that you bind it, obviously the more it's going to resist the dye. And I think that might have been part of my problem. So if you keep it kind of loosey-goosey, then you're going to have more areas that take to the dye and not as many bright white areas. If you were working with students, this would be a super easy thing for them to do. And of course, all of them are going to turn out really cool and fab. And then if they don't, then they can just re-dye it. That was the deal with this one. So this one, I dyed just like that. When I took it out, it had way too many white spots. So instead of dyeing it again, like I did with this one, I used the bead method. So wherever I saw large patches of white, I stuck the bead in it, twisted it, and bound it really good right there. And I love it because it's got that really random look to it. But at the same time, it has these really beautiful kind of flower shapes, which I really dig. They look like dandelions to me. This one is super easy to do. So this is another take on the accordion fold. But instead of using rubber bands, this is the last one I'm going to show you. So if you made it this far in the video, congratulations. You made it to the easiest one. So you're going to take your fabric and accordion fold it. The best part about doing this kind of dyeing is the experimenting. That's why I recommend getting cheap fabric, nothing that it's not gonna break your heart if you mess it up. Get a lot of it, cut it into squares, and then just go to town binding it. And then the whole time you're doing all of this, your dye is prepping and ready for you. So after you've got this accordion dyed, wherever you see these little parts right here, these lines, that's where I put a paper clip. You could do this same technique with a clothespin. It's just that I happen to have paper clips on hand, so I just kind of put one on one end and one on the other end, kind of like a zigzag line back and forth. Oh, and one more I want to show you. Unfortunately, I don't have the fabric on hand to show you what it looks like, but another fold you can do that's really fun, easy, and beautiful is to do that same triangular fold that you did with the squares. And like I said, it doesn't have to be perfect. That's why I'm rushing through it. Then take a couple of popsicle sticks. This one turns out really cool. Once you've got your popsicle sticks in place, bind them here and here and put that in the dye bath, and it will create these really beautiful lines throughout your dye. So, oh, I said one more. I said that was the last thing and I totally lied. Don't forget to try your hand at dyeing things like bracelets, beads, yarn, your hands, you name it, and have so much fun. Talk to you guys soon.